Hi everyone, and we all survived the first week. Hopefully you are getting used to our Blackboard site and it makes sense to you. You understand how to find the things you need. If you are having any confusion, questions, issues, please reach out now. It's a lot easier to get those things taken care of early on rather than later. So this is our second video task that you'll have to do for me. You did an introduction. It was really nice to learn a little bit more about each of you. I appreciated that. And you also did a confidence assessment. I asked you to sort of think about different kinds of, to assess yourself. You know, how confident are you on a number of things that we're actually going to be digging into a little bit more in the class. And I wanted to draw our attention to some of those things. So one of the things to keep in mind with the confidence assessment, it also gives you a little example of research, right? This is one of the ways that we conduct research in social scientific setting. So within the communication studies department, right? A survey like this we call a self-report. I'm sure you've seen many surveys like this before. That it's very common to use. And it's a self-report because basically we're asking people, what do you think? That can be useful. It can also be a little bit dangerous. So for instance, in this, I asked you to tell me how confident you were on a number of things, like how good are you at using Google? You know, not surprisingly, people rated themselves very high. I will tell you that that's not the same as seeing actually how good you are at using Google. And so hopefully it will be actually the week after next that we're going to start our second unit, which will be about finding information and sources. And you may just find that maybe you weren't as good at using Google as you thought you were. So be sure to do the assignments around that and to look into, you know, what are some of the tips to actually use Google more effectively. So self-reports, you know, they're not the same as the thing itself, but they tell us how people feel, right? So what this really tells me is not whether you're good at using Google or using the library, but how confident, right, your own assessment of your abilities. You also, I'm sure, have seen kinds of questions like this, the strongly agree to strongly disagree. We call those Likert-style questions. They can give us an idea of general trends or patterns of a population. So from this, I can collect overall data about the class in terms of, in general, how people feel. I can get descriptive statistics from this. I can know what the class mean is, median, mode, or range. So with this information, it can tell me overall about the kind of very general and broad views of a population. I bring this up now because in the final unit of the class, we're going to dig more deeply into, well, what is quantitative data and what is qualitative? And this just gives you a little preview of that. You also saw something that's more like qualitative data. I did have some open-ended responses. And the thing about this, unlike the quantitative style questions, is that you can get sort of unexpected results, right, when you sort of leave it open-ended. It also gives an opportunity for us to sort of dig deeper, to gain a deeper understanding of the meanings behind some of the information that we're looking for. What you end up having to do is sort of categorize to find themes or key ideas as a way of making sense of and being able to report on that kind of data. So I'll just give you a brief look at what that might sort of look at like. So with quantitative data, right, this kind of Likert style question, I can begin to get a sense overall of how the trend of the class. So for instance, in the question, I'm confident that I know how to effectively use the BSU library to find sources that I need. Most people veered toward the end of strongly agree, right? So that mean or the average is 3.69. So out of 5, that means people feel more confident than not that they know how to. The median was that people agree. The mode was that people agree. And the range is about 3. So, you know, it tells me that In general, people feel like they kind of know how to use the library, although not everybody feels very strongly that they know how to exactly find what they are looking for. So it can give me a kind of general picture of the course overall. As I mentioned before, we should be a little bit cautious always about any information that we see. It's really important to be able to ask questions. So what is this actually telling us? Like I said before, it tells us how confident people feel. It doesn't necessarily tell us their actual abilities. I say be careful here because actually there is research that talks about being overly confident, say on taking a test, feeling like you did really well. It's actually in some cases been statistically linked to doing more poorly. That people who are less confident oftentimes score higher on exams and things like that. Not always the case, but sometimes. So confidence doesn't tell us everything. In terms of qualitative data, right, these open-ended questions give us an opportunity to dig in a little bit deeper. Now, I can't tell you any information from that if I just list out all of the responses, but instead I can pull from those responses some sort of major themes or ideas, and therefore learn something about the class overall or the students in the class. One of the things that I find, and it's not shocking, is that in relationship to online courses, some of the things that people are worried about are things like managing their time, the overall workload, that people are excited about learning how to do better research and honing their writing skills and techniques, and just getting done. And that, some of the values that you probably have just for work in general are going to be really useful to you. Things like time management, but also dedication and hard work, being organized. So keep those things in mind as you move through the class. I also just want to give you a preview of looking ahead at the upcoming assignments. So this week you're going to have your first discussion leader discussion post, and I'm going to talk more about that in a second. It will be on the topic of fake news. One of the things that we're going to talk about further, and this will be covered more in my video next week, is this idea of fake news is kind of our theme for the class. And it is also what you will write your final paper on in this course. A lot of the assignments we have will be related to this topic in some way. And this is the first chance for us to start digging in and looking at some aspects of that. The other assignment you have for me, the Browsing Communication Journals assignment, this is assignment, the primary purpose is really just to give you a chance to start looking at what kinds of topics are covered in communication. So I've given you, and also to start to familiarize yourself with journals. So we'll talk more about these journals again, like I said, next week, but this is what one of those things looks like. Not online. It's kind of like a boring magazine. And if you looked closely, you'd see the articles are listed on the front here on this one. And then, they just have the articles inside. I think it's helpful to know that this is what it looks like. This is one issue of this publication. So I'm asking you to browse, one issue of 3 different communication journals to just get a sense of what kinds of things are published. I also just wanted to give a few updates about some questions that folks asked about this week. Some people asked about the style manual that I mentioned in the class. We'll use in the course an online version so that you don't have to purchase anything if you don't want to, but you should be able to get something like this for under $10 if you want, and it'll be useful to you throughout your college education. I like this one in particular, a Pocket Style Manual by Hacker is the name. You could go with, this is the 7th edition, you could probably go with the 6th edition even and be fine. This one has APA, MLA, and Chicago in it. I think it's really useful, and personally I find using a hard one easier than using the online one. So I just put it out there in case you're interested in purchasing that. I also want to draw your attention to some discussion, some changes on Blackboard not big ones, but as I mentioned, this is the first week that we will have discussion leaders. That means if you are pegged to be a discussion leader this week, you need to post your initial post by Thursday. I was waiting until I had the updates on the class in terms of drop-in ads. Those are in now. So that said, you'll see that the discussion leader schedule has changed very slightly due to those ads and drops. So please go back and look it over and make sure you have your dates set for when you're a discussion leader. Hopefully it won't change again. If it does, I will draw your attention to it. You can also find, if you go into the week that we're in, so now we will be into week 2. As you look through the information on week 2, you will see when you get to group discussion that I have put the discussion leaders for the week in there. And that will be now on every week. I will be updating that now that I have a set list. So you can also, look at the weekly overview to figure out if you're a discussion leader that week or not. And then one last thing I wanted to mention, a couple of students mentioned that they were having a hard time hearing the audio on the PowerPoints. If that is the case, I recommend you make sure that you are opening them up in Chrome, Google Chrome. It doesn't work with Internet Explorer. For whatever reason, Blackboard plays best with Chrome. If you do that and you make sure you're adjusting the volumes on each place and you still can't hear it, please get a hold of me right away and I'll see if there's what's going on. Sometimes if I just email it to you, that will fix the problem. So, we'll troubleshoot and figure out a way to overcome that. But first, see if it works for you in Google Chrome. As always, if you have questions, please feel free to email me. Don't forget that your work is due on Sunday. And one other thing I didn't mention the first time is if you go into the discussions here, you will also see a general course questions discussion board. This is always open and available for you. If you have a question about the class, you can email me directly, but if it's one that you think other students might have as well, you can also post your question there. All right, and hopefully this is a helpful video to you, and I'm looking forward to seeing your assignments in the future. I have graded the assignments that were due last week, so if you don't see a grade, and you think you've completed them, get a hold of me so that we can troubleshoot that issue earlier rather than later. Have a great week.